time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the Heartland, that'll have you saying, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, it's time for your intrepid podcast by George reporter to get back on the microphone, get it caught up a little bit with you all. And, first off, I'm asked a lot about the podcast, how it's going. We've been at it now for about a year or so. Very pleasantly surprised by the progress. Thousands of downloads. I think we're coming up on 6,000 now. We've got listeners around the world and viewers now because we're doing video podcasts like these. So that part of it's very gratifying. The part of it that's kind of disappointing is that there's still so much bad news to cover and kind of frustrating news as well. This thing about Iran, I don't know. Again, I look at it through a different set of eyes than a lot of people. But to me, what are we doing over there? What is going on with Iran and Saudi Arabia and Yemen? Let me give you my thumbnail on this. The United States backs out of the Iran treaty, that nuclear treaty that we had with Iran, and imposes a bunch of very punitive, very deadly sanctions against Iran, which impacts the people of Iran, mostly the civilians. And think of it this way. It denies food and medicine to babies. What happens when you deny food and medicine to babies? You want to have a reason to start a war? That'll do it, folks. And of course, Yemen is a proxy of Iran. Saudi Arabia has been practicing genocide, basically, against the country of Yemen for a number of years. And Yemen strikes a Saudi oil field with a drone, blows up a couple of pipes, sets off a couple of fires. It's an oil refinery that they hit. That'll burn a little bit. And now we're talking about going to war with Iran, and the news media and the Democrats and the Republicans are beating the drum. And, I think sometimes I ought to call this podcast Off the Rails, or maybe the world is nuts, because the voice of reason on a lot of this stuff is Donald Trump. My God, Trump, he's the one guy that doesn't want to go to war. He's the one that seems to have a little bit of common sense in this. And that's just hard to believe. And I want to put up on the screen here a map for you to explain a little bit more about Iran. These provocateurs, these people that are meddling, a lot of times it's said, in the Middle East, which happens to be where they reside, of course. What you're seeing on this map are the U.S. military bases surrounding Iran. You got to remember what we did. We overthrew Iraq. We have these military bases all around them. We withdrew from the peace treaty, just like we did with the Native Americans in this country. And then, my God, we blame them and want to go to war with them when we break the treaties. We broke the treaty with Iran, and they're the provocateurs. They're the ones that can't be trusted. Look at that map, ladies and gentlemen. And what you're not seeing there, what's not outlined are the waterways, the Gulf there, right off the shores of Iran. It's choked full of U.S. military vessels, the most sophisticated fighting machines the world has ever known. And we just can't understand why Iran behaves the way that they do. What if Iran was putting ships like we have in the Gulf of Mexico, pointed right at us? How would we respond? What would we do? Well, that's just a little bit to get us going here on the news this morning. And on the podcast, really what I want to talk about is the other major issue of the day, the thing that we talk about a lot here, and that is climate change. Friday was the big global climate change strike, and I'm going to read a little bit to you about that from the USA Today, because it includes a perspective on Des Moines. And Podcast by George was at the Des Moines event, got some video and some recordings for you, and we're going to play those. But I want to start off by reading a little bit from this article for you. So, Dateline, New York, USA Today. A boisterous crowd of at least 200,000 people turned out to chant and march in Manhattan on Friday, joining hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of protesters from Australia to Thailand to London and global climate strike rallies. Now, right off the top, one of the things I want to point out, and I do this a lot, make sure you understand this. If you get 200,000 people to turn out in New York City, that might be like 200 in Des Moines. I'm not real good at math, but it might be like 500 in Des Moines anyway. So the Des Moines turnout was very good in comparison to 200,000 in New York, and that's a massive turnout. That's a hell of a lot of people. 200,000 is a lot of humanity. While supporters of all ages turned out, the day was billed as a walkout by high school students to call on world leaders to step up their efforts against climate change, carbon emissions, and other environmental issues. Greta Thunberg, the noted 16-year-old Swedish environmentalist activist whose efforts have been raising environmental consciousness around the globe, spoke to a crowd of tens of thousands in New York City's Battery Park. And folks, I don't know if you've gotten a load of this 16-year-old, but what a delight. My God, makes you proud to be old that somebody that young can be that knowledgeable, that articulate, that aware, and that concerned about the future of the planet. Great on Greta. She says, around the world today, about 4 million people have been striking. This is the biggest climate strike ever in history, and we all should be so proud of ourselves because we have done this together. Again, that's the great Greta. Okay, I want to scroll down here in the story because it's got a perspective from Des Moines in this USA Today article, and I just think this is just great. So let's go on down here to Peyton Strobel stood on the steps of the Iowa State Capitol late Friday morning, looking out at a tie-dyed sea of climate activism. Strobel, a 14-year-old freshman at Waukee Prairie View School, wore a black T-shirt as she held a microphone and summarized the feelings of student climate activists in the crowd. Our generation is the last best hope, Strobel said. More than 200 scientists from 38 Iowa colleges and universities signed a report released last Thursday that said Iowa will have more than 67 calendar days per year above 90 degrees by 2050, compared with 23 days in recent decades. And it was right at 90 degrees on this late September day at the Des Moines Capitol, so it couldn't have been more poignant. Now here's Isabella Cook of West Des Moines. She told the crowd that strong thunder and lightning from a recent thunderstorm roused her into climate activism, and like others, Cook wants businesses and politicians to find alternatives to plastic waste that harms the environment. We will declare a future for ourselves, Cook told the crowd. So let's hear more now from Isabella Cook.
At this point, we know that climate change is on the course to kill us all. Scientific team after scientific team has proven that we are living on borrowed time, that we only have years, months before extinction. But they've also given us the tools. We have given ourselves the tools to prevent that from happening. We have a wide variety of ways to produce renewable energy by harnessing everything from the wind to the waves to the sun. We have countless alternatives for single-use plastic or animal-based products. We have the technology to remove excess carbon from our atmosphere and our oceans. The bittersweet, laughable irony about the path we're on right now is that we can save ourselves from it, but we won't. And that's why we're here today. That's why we've abandoned our schools, our workplaces, our daily routines for a few hours. Because we know that life as we know it is not far off from coming to a grinding, terrible halt. We are not a legislature, not a cabinet, not a president or national authority of any official kind, but we know that we have the power to either influence those people or exchange them for better ones. And if these institutions refuse to take actions in our best interest, if they refuse to save us, then we will save ourselves. We can and we will declare a climate emergency in Iowa and in the nation. We can and we will demand that corporations do away with single-use products. We can and we will demand a completely renewable energy-based society as soon as possible. We can and we will demand the Green New Deal. Defying authority, putting on public marches and strikes and demonstrations are difficult in many more ways than just one, but extreme measures are the only ones we can afford to take at this point. The storm is no longer on the horizon. The storm is here. The storm is right now, and the storm will only get worse in the future. This we know. I encourage you to embrace the fear, to shake along with the walls when the thunder hits. Self-preservation and altruism, banding people together to make everyone better, is the only way we will survive this crisis. And I believe in us. I'm scared, I'm terrified, but I'm not giving up yet. I will see you all if the storm clears. Hopefully, we'll be able to look at the rainbow together.
So that's Isabella Cook getting a little FaceTime on Podcast by George, but more importantly, some nice quotes and coverage in USA Today. I wanted to spin through some of the speakers and just some of the crowd and the reactions at the event on Friday. And next up, two young ladies that also skip school to make some special requests of our elected officials.
Elected officials, together we've come to you with an urgent agenda. Here are the policies the people are asking of you. We ask that you enact legislation that allows for the U.S. to be carbon neutral by 2050. We ask that education and curriculum is made to address climate change and other environmental issues through K through 12. We ask that you pass the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. We ask that you work to secure jobs in clean energy. We ask that you have all decisions tied to IPCC reports, and we ask that you pass a Green New Deal.
And then they closed their comments by calling for elected officials to call a national emergency on the climate crisis. So before we wrap up today, I just couldn't leave or get out of this without including this little clip. And it was really hot. Again, it couldn't have been more apropos for climate crisis and the hothouse gases and the warming of the planet and everything. My God, it's September 20th in Des Moines, and it's 90 degrees and a blazing sun. And I know this time of year very well because it's around the time of my birthday. So I remember about, 60 of these, and ain't none of them like they have been recently. It used to be cool, getting cold this time of year, and that's not the case. Now, that's just an isolated thumbnail, just one person's perspective, but maybe it means something. I know this is all about longer trends and historical significance when it comes to climate change, but man, was it hot. So anyway, I looked for a tree to get under, get a little shade toward the end of this, and was speaking to a Des Moines mother and her daughter, Charlotte, and she decided to take the day off and go to the event with her mother, and here's what she had to say.
I sent a message out and said, who wants to ride with us in our community from Waukee? I don't know that anyone else came out. I was really shocked. People aren't getting it. This whole lie that it's not happening is actually working, which is sad and sick. But my daughter did come out from Waukee Elementary.
Yeah. What's her name?
Charlotte.
Charlotte?
He has a podcast.
Yeah, Charlotte. So where are your classmates, do you think?
At school.
Well, you came, and that's good.
Yes.
Are you worried about your future and climate change and how it'll affect your life when you grow up?
Yeah.
Sure.
She's tried to get the school to recycle milk cartons and some other things she's brought to the administration for recycling efforts.
What's the school tell you?
Well, I wrote a letter to my principal and to the recycling person, and the recycling guy, Gary, he did not respond to me. Miss Johnson, I had one meeting with her about it. She emailed the recycling person, Gary, and he did not respond.
So she feels a little stuck with her efforts. But we did meet with several recycling companies, and they sent representatives to speak with her and have meetings. So that was nice.
So I just had to include that. I mean, that's as cute can be. I don't know. When I was a younger man, I didn't mean anything to me, but now that I'm getting on, I don't know. Those things they're kind of they're cute. They make you misty-eyed almost. But anyway, let's get on out of here. I hope you appreciated this. It's just a quick update, a little bit of a newsworthy item from the Heartland, which has a lot to do with what this podcast is all about and why it's getting more popular all the time. And I'm happy with that and happy to bring the news of the day to you. And for right now, that's another podcast by George.